Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 80 of Fracking Nightmare. 79 shows were broadcast from the old UK column studios. So this is the very first show. In fact, it's the second show ever to be broadcast from the new studios here in Plymouth. And I'm delighted tonight to welcome back, for the fourth time, Susan Gorman-Chang, who's been giving us her updates as a resident of Porter Ranch, which has had a gas leak, a phenomenal methane gas leak, which has been pumping out of the gas storage caverns just adjacent to the Porter Ranch subdivision, housing estate, as we might call it in the UK, although houses on this estate are average price around about $500,000. But since October the 23rd, the methane has been belching out from the gas caverns, and Susan has been giving us those updates. But there has been a development, and literally in the last few days, it has been announced that the gas leak has been stopped. Susan, welcome back to Fracking Nightmare. An absolute pleasure to have you back on, and thanks for joining us today, especially because it is President's Day. I'm sure there are those in the US and certainly many in Europe who would suggest that right now there's nothing to celebrate about the US president, but that's a whole other debate. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us, what is the latest situation in Porter Ranch? Are the residents in a state of euphoria?
No, not really. We're probably in a skepticism is more like it. The gas companies told us the leak has been plugged in the one well. Remember, we have hundreds of other wells that are that old. Over half are more than 58 years old, 8 are 81 years old. So that's just the one that blew, and they said it's plugged. The regulatory agency, Dogger, has not confirmed it yet. They need to do a lot of tests. And Dogger doesn't do anything about air quality testing. That's another agency. So we are calling for independent air monitoring and testing before we know that the air is clean enough for us to go back. So we don't plan to go back until that happens. Some residents, I understand, have returned, but most are skeptical and not returning yet.
But I also understand that there are a number of residents that didn't actually manage to get away, and so they have been in Porter Ranch for the duration of the leak. Correct.
There's still, I think, 1,800 homes on that list of people that were desperate to get out and haven't gotten out. I think SoCal Gas's position now is, it's very close to the end, and they said they didn't want to give any more leases for houses, and they, at this point, said they couldn't find any more hotels for people. And so, yeah, there were some people, stuck there for the duration, which is very disturbing. Right now, we're all sort of in limbo. SoCal Gas would like to pretend it's all over and we can all go back and pretend this never happened, but we're going to make sure that doesn't happen, because this did happen. The other aging wells back there, are next to blow, in my opinion, and so we've got to keep the pressure on to really shut the facility down once and for all.
And we've talked in previous discussions about the number of people who were getting sick. Obviously pets were the first to suffer, and we discussed a number of people who lost their pets in the early days of the leak. But has there still been a continuance of people suffering from negative health effects as a result of the gas leak?
Yes, those that are still trapped there, yeah, they have continued. I spoke to a mother the other day who has a lot of respiratory and asthma issues and have been hospitalized several times, and hasn't been able to get out. Another concern that has come up with UCLA people doing some air monitoring there is hydrogen sulfide. There was a study in Australia that found that sometimes methyl mercaptan, which is the odorant added to natural gas, can convert to hydrogen sulfide in these underground caverns that had previously been oil drilling facilities. And so they have stayed on to monitor the air, and they are funded by 11th Hour, which is a nonprofit. And so that's kind of a new development that we may have been exposed to hydrogen sulfide as well. And that for sure gives nosebleeds and some of the other symptoms that maybe methyl mercaptan on its own wouldn't have given us. So there's a new development of another chemical we may have been exposed to.
And I mean, we saw in previous weeks from this particular study, this was showing, of course, that the area closest to the well had the highest level of contamination. And as we discussed as well, this was only looking at the methane. So I think we can safely assume that the other elements that we know to have been present, like the BTEX, the benzene, toluene, the ethylbenzene, the xylenes, would have also been the highest in this area.
Yes.
Has there been any discussion to date on the preparation of people's properties before they return? Because with this level of exposure, it would seem quite probable that people left their houses relatively quickly. They took probably a bare minimum of personal clothing. So there are carpets, there are drapes, curtains as we call them in the UK, soft furnishings, bedding, and of course clothing that will have been exposed to this toxicity. So is there any kind of plan or strategy to clean people's homes, to dry clean the carpets, the soft furnishings before they go? Because otherwise, my prognosis would be that there is the risk of people going back into contaminated properties and in 6 months' time developing the symptoms as though the gas leak was still leaching.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, we're getting with our public officials to call for SoCalGas to pay for that, to pay for a complete cleaning of the house. We had something similar done after we had a fire. Didn't get our house, but it got into the backyard and melted the sprinklers and whatnot, but we had a lot of smoke damage. And we had a company come in the fire insurance paid for it, and cleaned everything top to bottom, and then had the clothes that needed to be dry cleaned, and the vents cleaned. And we really do need that kind of cleaning before we move back in. You're absolutely right, because to me, all those toxins are still there. Well, unfortunately, the LA County Department of Health has said, this is a quote from their document, since methane and other chemicals of concern are gases, they do not settle and contaminate soil. However, residents may have concern about the oily residue resulting from recent drilling operations near the leaking well. Residents should avoid contact with fruit, vegetables, and any surfaces that appear to be coated with an oily residue. If you see any oily residue on food or other surfaces, call SoCalGas to send staff to assess and clean up as needed. I would say the cleanup should be of every home, of every surface, regardless. I mean, again, you don't move in and get exposed to it again and then wait for SoCalGas to send someone to, assess it, etc. I mean, I think that the most cautious way to go, and the only way to go, is to have it all clean before we even move back in there. And that's a huge job. We're talking, 5,000 homes of people that relocated. I mean, this is going to take some time, more than the 8 days and 7 nights that they have given us to move back. They say once Dogger has certified that the well is plugged. But again, we're fighting about, okay, what about the air quality? We need to ensure that the air quality is okay before we move in. So there's a whole lot that needs to go on. We will not be rushed back in there before it's safe.
Well, my guess is that there isn't enough cleaning companies, probably in Southern California, to be able to address all those properties within 7 or 8 days. I mean, not a cat's chance. And
Right.
I mean, of course, I mean, this is a potential enormous revenue opportunity for those companies, particularly those who are prepared to pretty much work around the clock
Right.
to facilitate people being able to move back home.
Right. Right. And we have some city councilmen and county assemblymen calling for, more like 30 days. So you're right. So we can all schedule, all of this cleaning to happen, and the moving, they leased furniture for us here, but other people had some furniture moved. I mean, all of those things are going to take longer than a week when you have that massive migration back into a community.
Absolutely. My calculation, so that's something in the region of 200 properties a day that are going to have to be totally cleansed before people go back in. And, again, my counsel would be to absolutely ensure that the cleaning is done first, because otherwise I know what's going to happen. The mindset of these companies is to kick the can down the road as far as they possibly can. And then, when people start getting sick in 6, 9 or 12 months, their response is going to be, well, it's nothing to do with us.
Right.
There's been far too much time passed, for it to be anything to do with us whatsoever. And unfortunately, at that point, of course, the people are going to pick up the liability themselves.
Right, exactly. So this is, far from over. We have a lot of work to do, a lot of our rights that we need to make known and keep pushing for. So I know the news, I get a little frustrated. I have to temper my response when people say, oh, everything's fine and you're moving back in, because that's what they've heard from SoCal Gas, and that's their public relations firm doing its job. So yeah, there's a lot more work and a lot more issues. We're also worried about methane migration.
Yep.
Has that been migrated under our homes during all this trauma of them trying to plug that leak? We're concerned about the chemicals we've been exposed to, which we still have no list on. So there's a lot of issues.
Well, I saw that the LA Times, did actually in their report say the gas leak at Porter Ranch is stopped, at least temporarily. And then they said that the gas company said a relief well reached the base of the leaking well, and that officials are now pumping heavy fluids, muds, to temporarily control the flow of gas out of the leaking well. They do say that could keep the leak plugged permanently. But as we have discussed previously, SoCal have admitted that they have removed some of the safety valves from other wells. They had the funding to replace them, but they've actually admitted that they haven't done that. So, the whole facility is potentially another disaster waiting to happen.
Absolutely. It's well past its lifespan. It's ridiculous.
So, I can completely understand people who want to get back. They want to return to some normality. But actually, based on previous experience of other incidences not like this, but I'm talking, other areas that have been affected by these types of disasters, then, caution is the appropriate stance here.
Absolutely. We have to keep our eye on the ball, and it's hard. You're right. People do want to go back to their normal life. They want their life back. But if you have your life back for only a short period of time and then we're in the same disaster, you've gained nothing.
Well, and the key element again is, to obviously watch out for the pets, because they're like the canaries in this situation. As you saw in the early weeks, it was the dogs and the cats that were, the first indicators that something was wrong. Then it's the young children and the elderly. And some people seem to be able to survive, in almost any environment. But, you never can tell who it's going to impact on next.
Right. Well, I liken it to not 100% of the people that smoke get lung cancer, but
exactly.
We know it causes lung cancer, right? So, yeah, nothing is 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Susan, look, it's certainly not over by any stretch of the imagination. The media, certainly in Europe, not that they're reporting on it particularly, but, page 27 or whatever, you get a paragraph of a few lines that simply says, Porter Ranch gas well plugged. And that's it, nothing else to see, move along.
Yes, so I thank you for continuing to cover this because it's not over. We still have a lot of issues to deal with, and I really appreciate it.
Well, Susan, we'll be staying in touch. And obviously, as there are developments, then, it'd be wonderful to have you back because, as you've discussed previously, when we had the residents of the Fyle Peninsula where they're being targeted with a similar facility, gas caverns beneath their community in the northwest of England. And I know that they have very much taken on board, your comments and the experiences that you've been through here. So, thank you very much for sharing and please, pass on our best wishes to the residents of Porter Ranch. Our thoughts are very much with them.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Well, meanwhile, although Porter Ranch hasn't made it into the British media, some of you or maybe all of you watching Fracking Nightmare have watched the documentary Voices from the Gas Fields, which I released in late March, early April of last year. And in Voices from the Gas Fields, we looked at the Condamine River and the gas that's been bubbling up into the Condamine River in southern Queensland for some 8 years now, I think, since it was first brought to light by John Jenkins and Brian Monk, of course, both of whom feature in Voices from the Gas Fields. Well, today on the Mail Online website, and I'm told that the Mail Online is the most viewed national online news outlet in the world. Unfortunately, many of the articles which appear on the Mail Online site do not make it into the print version. So here we have today's print version, and not a mention of the Condamine gas leaks, but online. Here's the headline: the Australian river so polluted it boils with methane gas and burns when you hold a match to the bubbling water. And goes on to say, a river with bubbles exploding from the surface is said to smell of fish. That's primarily dead fish. The Condamine River in Queensland has methane erupting from the surface. Local landowners said the issue had gotten worse in the past 12 months. And it mentions John Jenkins kayaked onto the river, took photographs of it being set on fire. And this is one of the photographs published on the Mail's website. So this is really quite something that the Mail Online publishes this. Of course, it doesn't make any connect with what's occurring here in the UK. But this was the documentary, Voices from the Gas Fields. And the tragedy of southern Queensland has been perpetrated by a company called QGC, which is Queensland Gas Company, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of BG Group, based in Reading in southern England, just about 40 miles to the west of London. And BG Group has just been acquired by Shell. So it's very interesting here. And a little later on, we're going to be taking a look at what occurred in Ireland when Shell were riding roughshod over the local community in County Mayo. And maybe here's an opportunity, although funnily enough, Shell have divested themselves of their entire downstream business in Australia. They clearly did not want to repeat the experience that they had in Ireland a few years ago. And we'll be taking a look at that a little bit later on this evening. So Voices from the Gas Fields is still the most current UK documentary on the subject. But a new documentary is in the making and is due to be released in the spring. And this is looking at methane contamination of water supplies in the United States as a result of the unconventional gas industry, obviously primarily hydraulic fracturing. So we're going to take a break now, and in the break we're going to take a look at the trailer for this new documentary, and the title of the documentary is The Fracking Flame.
Fracking hasn't polluted water wells.
There has never been an indication of groundwater contamination from hydraulic fracturing.
There has never been any water ever contaminated from fracking.
No documented evidence of contamination of drinking water, ever.
Our team at UT Arlington, we've detected BTEX compounds, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene. Xylene, we've detected cyclohexane, we've detected chlorinated compounds. Dichloromethane, chloroform. We've detected these exogenous, which means they should not be in the water, constituents in Mr. Lipsky's water.
The local government in Texas tells Steve Lipsky that the water from his well, water that he can set on fire, is safe to drink and to use in his home.
Would you pump that into your house? Would you drink it?
This is the well from which he gets his water.
It'll go like that just as long as I leave it on.
That much methane is burning off in your water well.
Yeah.
How many of you lost your water supply? And there are many more.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a problem with EPA right now. I advise you to come back and do your damn job and tell us the truth.
He's hooked that up to a gas vent.
Stunt.
They intentionally pump gas into the water line in order to set it on fire.
To deceive.
Deceptive video.
It was a fraud.
EPA scientists and engineers have looked extensively at a lot of data, and we're confident that Range is responsible for this natural gas in the drinking water aquifer, and we've ordered them to take the necessary steps to stop it.
Way too much methane and other chemicals in my water, and the documents prove it here.
But we still don't have water.
And we still don't have water.
There you go, that's the trailer for The Fracking Flame, a documentary being produced in the US, looking at the contamination, the methane migration into the water supply. Primarily, of course, of people who draw their water from private wells. And of course, the unconventional gas industry, as you saw briefly in that trailer, will do everything it can to deny any relationship between its activities and the contamination. And in the UK, we've already seen Francis Egan specifically state that there have been no cases of contamination of a public water supply in the US. So we have to listen very carefully to the semantics, and we'll be discussing semantics a little later on when we talk about what's going on at Horse Hill, just to the north of Gatwick Airport a little later. But first of all, I want to bring my second guest in tonight, and this is Steve Spy, Dr. Stephen Piers. Steve Spy, he has his YouTube channel is under that name, so if you want to catch any of his videos, that's the place to go. And of course, Steve has been with us a number of times over the last few weeks, primarily because, of course, he was reporting from the Upton Protection Camp, which was evicted, I think it's, what would that be, 4 weeks ago? I've lost track of time. Steve, are you with us?
Yes, I am, yes.
So is it, I've lost track. Time flies when you're having fun. Was it 4 weeks ago? Or?
Yeah, it's about 4 weeks ago now, just a bit over, in fact.
Just a bit over 4 weeks. And here's one of the photographs that we showed from that event, where there was some, well, I've seen reports of 175 to 200 police. And how many High Court bailiffs do you estimate were there at the day?
There are estimates of about 50 High Court bailiffs, but police were drafted in from 4 different forces. I was bumping into officers that I knew from Barton Moss, GMP officers. They had Merseyside Police Office, Headloo, obviously the Welsh Police, and Cheshire as well. So it was a massive police operation.
So it was estimated that the police operation cost around about £200,000. In fact, that's what Cheshire Police have stated. And they say it was a 6-day operation. So it wasn't just obviously the first day, because they were also maintaining an exclusion zone. Was it Section 35, is it?
They imposed unlawful Section 35s on everybody that was kicked off the site, including myself. I explained to them at the time that I lived in that location. You cannot Section 35 somebody away from their home, which was what they attempted to do. Some of the conditions were absolutely ridiculous. I returned 2 days later after being issued a Section 35. And was arrested straight away, even though it was outside the time limit. I was bailed not to be in Cheshire at all. It was absolutely ridiculous and unwarranted abuse of process, and they're trying to stop a peaceful protest. And disregarding Articles 10 and 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which gives us the right to peacefully protest.
But did you go to court and get that Section 35 lifted?
We did. Matt Bryant, the councillor, he was one of the first ones to have his ridiculous bail conditions lifted. Obviously, he's a councillor, and they were stopping him doing his lawful elected duty around the constituency. We went in soon after that and got those our bail conditions overturned as well, because they were just nonsense. You can't, to bail somebody out of the whole of Cheshire is totally ridiculous.
Well, and of course, the police stated in the article, they said 12 people were removed from the field in a difficult and challenging policing operation. Now, the camp had been in situ since April of 2014, so some 21 months. Let me just ask you a hypothetical question for a second. Consider the possibility that iGas had announced that they were going to withdraw from the Upton site and would have no intention of drilling there. What would the reaction of the camp have been to that announcement?
Well, we would have certainly had a celebration, and we would have packed up and peacefully been on our way, and we'd have totally cleaned the site up before moving on and restored it back to the field that we believe it should be. We don't think it should be a fracking operation at all.
So what you've just described has in fact been the modus operandi of every camp to date. I mean, whenever the company, even if they have had the opportunity to go back, whenever they have vacated a site, the camp has effectively moved away and cleaned up the field or the verge or wherever it is they're pitched, and actually left it in a better shape than they found it. Yeah.
Certainly, every operation that I've ever seen, certainly the Barton Moss one springs to mind, where we left that in entirely a better condition. Like plants were planted once we moved off the actual verges and that, and it was left in pristine condition. So that would have been the state at Upton had we been allowed to do that. Currently, there's a High Court injunction preventing us from going on there, so we can't even go in and tidy up the mess that the bailiffs created on that day by moving us off there.
So the mess that remains was actually created, of course, as a result of the eviction. So what are your thoughts? Because not even 3 weeks after the eviction, iGas announced that they were pulling out of the Chester sites, both at Upton and in Mickle Trafford. And, here's the report. It says the news comes just after 3 weeks after a 20-month protest camp was evicted from the Duttons Lane site in an expensive operation involving High Court bailiffs and police who estimated their costs at £200,000. So you were there. You have been obviously communicating in one way, shape or form with the police over this period. But what are your thoughts on why iGas initiated the eviction? I mean, okay, they got the High Court injunction, but why do you think they went ahead with the eviction when it's clear that they probably, well, if they didn't know 3 weeks before they announced the pullout, they were going to pull out, then that smacks of crass incompetence. So why do you think they went ahead with that eviction, knowing that they were about to announce that they were pulling out of Cheshire?
Well, I would agree with you. It's mass incompetence. It was absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, we had the Newt situation on there. The minute the bailiffs moved in, and we resisted for as long as we could. There was other people there just ready to step forward and raise the Great Crested Newt situation there, where they couldn't clear the site. Obviously, the migration, the hibernation period of the newts was up till March. And then a 12-week survey of the Newt population would have taken them over their planning permission. If iGas weren't aware that was going to be an issue, that's just gross incompetence, because we'd certainly raised the issue time and time again, in the run up to like court proceedings and eviction proceedings. So to go ahead to spend all that time, money, police resources, and I believe iGas should pay for the police resources wasted on that day. It was just massively overpoliced.
Well, of course, you're not the only one who thinks that the police should get some recompense from iGas. And here's an article that appeared in the Chester Chronicle last week. Outraged Cheshire police boss aims to recover £200,000 costs from the energy firm. And this is, of course, relating to the Cheshire Police and Crime Commissioner, John Dwyer, who is outraged. Now, I would suggest that the likelihood of him being able to recover that money from iGas is probably slim to none. I mean, they will no doubt plead poverty, considering the price of oil right now. But I mean, it gets into that sort of fine line of whether or not the corporations should pay for the police, on the basis that if they start paying for the police, then they will literally control them directly. Whereas we might argue that they pretty much seem to operate that way anyway. But I mean, what do you think is the likely outcome of this?
Well, obviously, I think iGas is on its knees. It's the share prices is just tumbling. It's going to go to liquidation at some stage, or it's going to be bought out at some stage. So I think there's little hope. But I would say to the police that they should press ahead and try and recuperate those losses, because it's of public interest. They wasted vast amounts of police resources Obviously, iGas wanted to mount this operation. We always maintained it was a peaceful protest. It didn't need to be over-policed, but they requested those resources. Many hundreds of police officers were inconvenienced, having the leaves cancelled. Obviously, I'd a chat to quite a few of them who were most inconvenienced at being drafted into the policing operation on that day, and it's certainly it's something that they didn't need to do, bearing in mind iGas's decision now to pull off the sites. If they'd have just announced that beforehand, we could have just cleaned up, all gone home, and you know, been very happy without being arrested, without being brutalised by bailiffs, without all those many health and safety violations. You know, one young girl being nearly thrown off a roof, you know, still saws being used on, you know, on lockers very close to people's arms and things like that. It was a very dangerous operation carried out with very little regard for health and safety. I think the bailiff should hang their head in shame, and the police should be compensated for the total waste of their time in coming out on that day to supervise what was a needless operation.
Well, iGas have effectively given the metaphorical finger in their response. They say protesters were on the site illegally. It's a matter for the local police authority to assess the policing requirements needed to support the eviction process, which of course completely misses the point as to why the eviction was actually necessary at all, when they could have simply left them there for another 3 weeks, announced their pull out, and then the protection community would have gone their separate ways. Meanwhile, as you rightly say, of course, the iGas stock price still wallows at less than 16 pence. So it is still at around 10% of its peak two years ago in January 2014, when it hit £1.60. But of course, that's right in line, really, you know, with the oil price. The oil price is still below $30 a barrel. And of course, iGas, in their last financial report, bragged that they had got their operating costs down to the point where they would break even at $32 a barrel. Well, $29.44 was less than 32 when I was at school anyway. So it seems that iGas are actually paying about $2.50 for the privilege of getting a barrel of oil out of the ground at the moment. And, you know, clearly the unconventional operations would cost them a lot more. So, you know, one has to wonder, really, what they're doing. So, Steve, what's happened to all the people who were part of the protection community?
Well, the protection community's not gone away. We're not going away. We've got a camp now occupied. It's about 10 miles from the old Upton site. It's a Kinnerton in Cheshire, just by the Welsh border. We've got a protection community here that we're trying to fight. The planning permission that's been granted here is for a full coal bed methane production site, and there's no coal on the Cheshire side of the border. All the coal here is on the Welsh side of the border. Wales has not been consulted on this. There's a moratorium in Wales against this type of activity, and it would seem that the planning permission here, done under delegated powers yet again, without a full council consultation, and they're obviously planning to drill into Wales to steal their resources there. It's massive scandal after scandal that iGas are involved in.
That's it sounds like what Kuwait were doing to Iraq in 1990, when they were drilling from their rigs into the neutral zone as part of the baiting of Saddam Hussein to get him to invade the country. The tangled webs we weave. But I'm sure the modus operandi here is not to get the Welsh to invade England, but nonetheless, it might be a minor political furore. Well, Steve, you know, you guys have achieved a tremendous result. You know, your continued presence there for 20 months. It was the longest standing protection camp in the UK. And, you know, okay, regardless of the way it ended, it was a victory. However, iGas want to present it, you know, once again, the anti-fracking community, you know, comes up trumps. And, you know, best of luck with what you're doing right now. and keep the pressure on.
Right, we certainly will keep the pressure on. There's committed individuals. Obviously, we're looking at all the other sites that the iGas and other corporations that have planning permission up and down the country. And wherever they try this process, there'll be members of the protection community to meet them there and stop them at this evil industry that's just going to destroy this country if we let them do it.
Well, and the other great success that the protection camp has achieved is raising awareness in the local community. And, I had the opportunity, obviously, to drop by and catch with you and some of the members of the local community yesterday afternoon at your little celebration there. And it's very, very clear that, the community is extremely grateful to the protection camp for not only their resilience, but also the effort that's been put in to helping to raise awareness and get the local community mobilised so that iGas will know that they're going to meet community resistance wherever they try and get their bits in the ground.
There's been a fantastic response from the local community in Upton, all around Cheshire, and this is the way that we're going to win this battle. The minute that protection camp was trashed and bulldozed by the bailiffs and protectors bailed away, so they weren't able to hold that field, the local community stepped in. They formed a barricade on that the top of the Duttons Lane, the main way into the site, and made it clear that it didn't matter that they'd managed to shift the protection community. The locals were going to step in and say no to iGas and any other corporation that wants to come in and try and frack and carry out coal bed methane extraction. That is the way that the battle is going to be won. So we welcome all the local support and thank the local community, because we couldn't have survived for that 2 years on there without their full support.
Outstanding. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for joining me, and we'll be hooking up again shortly. Take care, my friend, and give our best wishes to all the members of the protection community up there in Cheshire.
I certainly will. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Steve. Take care, my friend. Okay, well, I mentioned earlier about Shell making the acquisition of BG Group. And here we have the situation. This is Shell acquired BG Group, and BG Group are the owners of QGC. So Shell is now the de facto owner of the unconventional gas company that has caused the destruction, no other word for it, the absolute destruction and contamination of southern Queensland. And although unfortunately, as Brian Monk and John Jenkins will state, they are unfortunately were caught asleep at the wheel. That's Brian's own words. But hopefully their experience will not be wasted, and other communities will never allow the unconventional gas companies to take such a foothold. Well, in Ireland, back in 2009, 2010, in County Mayo, the Irish community made a phenomenal challenge on Shell, so much so that Shell was forced to rebrand all of its petrol stations to Topaz. And even to this day, many people in Ireland do not realise that Topaz is simply Shell rebranded. And there is an amazing documentary which has been around for some 5 years now, but it's extremely important that people do not forget the power of the local community, because it was the power of the local community raising awareness of what was occurring in County Mayo across Ireland that led to the boycott of Shell petrol stations, which forced Shell to rebrand to Topaz. And this story is documented in a film called The Pipe. Now, this documentary is available online. It's also on my YouTube channel, which is Ian R. Crane. But here's an insight. Here's the trailer for The Pipe and an insight to community power in Ireland 5 years ago.
That's what they did at the beginning. They came telling us what they were going to do. They never asked us at any stage for permission.
The more you see wrong being done, the more angrier you get.
We wouldn't be doing this if we thought it was just a noble cause and a heroic failure.
It's pretty much forcing everybody's hand.
I have a right to be here. This is where I've been all my life.
If we don't act now, we'll regret it forever.
I have an awful lot at stake here. Look, there's no sense to this, and you know that. It'll never be the same, like, it'll never. It has a mark left in the community that'll never be healed. I'm going nowhere.
The negotiating is over. The rule of law has to be implemented.
You could only see danger.
This is Shell's law.
Blood cops, blood money.
Here they try to make criminals out of us ordinary people.
They won't clear us,
Leave what area? This is my area. It's the sadness that gets to you.
It'll be our last chance to show that we are reasonable people.
Do you think that I'd let a Shell worker onto my property?
You feel you're being watched every move you make.
Never. Never. Silt, oil, dirt.
Fucking sends me out.
Stay clear for your own safety and the safety of the other vessels.
This could go on forever.
And welcome back to part 3 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, another event that's ongoing right now is the Cuadzilla inquiry in Blackpool. Originally scheduled to last for 3 weeks, it's been extended to 5 weeks. One can surmise that perhaps there was a desire to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to have their say. The less generous might suggest that it was deliberately extended to cost the local anti-fracking community even more of their limited funding. Well, if you want to follow that inquiry, I would strongly recommend that you subscribe to the website Drill or Drop. It's on the screen here. It's drillordrop.com. This is the excellent website of Ruth Hayhurst. Now, Ruth has, I think, taken up residence in the inquiry at Blackpool Football Club, and she is putting out regular updates on the discussions. Now, the 5-week inquiry, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I was there on Monday. I participated in Tuesday rather. I participated in the rally on the first day there. There were a handful of pro-frackers, but they were only paid for an hour, so they all disappeared at around about 10 o'clock. But I'm not really going to spend too much time there, because whatever comes out of the Blackpool inquiry is effectively a win-win for the anti-fracking community. Lancashire County Council made the decision last June that Cuadzilla should not be granted permission to drill and frack at the 2 sites, at Preston New Road and at Rossiter. Cuadzilla have appealed. Now, under normal circumstances, not a problem. That's the normal part of the process. And a planning inspector is then assigned to hear the evidence from both sides and then make the decision accordingly. But in this case, the government, the UK government, unsurprisingly, has stated that it will make the decision. So the planning inspector will simply make her recommendation. She will submit her report to Greg Clark, the communities minister, who, in conjunction with his colleagues at the Department of Energy and Climate Change, that's Amber Rudd and Andrea Leadsom, they will make the decision. And I'm sure, because we've seen the correspondence, that decision is a foregone conclusion. So what is occurring right now is a total charade. It's simply a pantomime to give the impression to the local community and the wider community that due process is being adhered to. Well, that's a complete crock. Now, in the extremely unlikely event that the planning inspector recommends that Lancashire County Council decision is upheld, she may actually recommend that, but we'll never know because she just simply makes that submits that report to Greg Clark. But in the unlikely event that he upholds the Lancashire County Council decision not to permit Cuadzilla to frack, then obviously that's a win for the local community. In the event that Greg Clark overturns the Lancashire County Council decision, even one of the two sites, if he overturns that, then it will be prima facie evidence that democracy is effectively dead and that this government is simply determined to ride roughshod over any community that doesn't make the decision that it wants them to make. So consequently, the warning bells will ring around other communities that are being targeted by the unconventional gas industry, and it will be yet another recruiting opportunity for the anti-fracking community. So it's a win-win. However this inquiry turns out. But do follow it because there's lessons to be learned. There's a lot of very useful information which other communities will be able to pick up on and adapt to their particular situation in the coming months and years. So that's Blackpool. So we'll report on it from time to time, but we won't waste too much time on it. But there's a live operation going on right now. It's 18 months, not even, 16 months since Horse Hill first went live. In fact, it was episodes 39 and 40 when we were examining the veracity of David Lenegas's claims that there was more oil under the Weald in southern England than there was in the North Sea. A claim that ultimately cost David Lenegas his appointment as chairman of UK Oil and Gas. Well, I'm delighted to be joined by an old friend. We first met at Balcombe, that's 2.5 years ago now, in the summer of 2013. So, Jono, it's not Balcombe this time, it's a few miles up the road at Horse Hill, just north of Gatwick Airport. And in fact, for those people who don't have a good geographical knowledge of the south of England, this is where it is. It's just outside the M25, literally just a few miles, not even, it's about 1.5 miles, I think, to the west of the M23, and about 1 mile or so north of Gatwick Airport. And the closest community there is the village of Hawley. But there's a lot of other smaller villages and communities. And, you know, when I drive around that area, the average property price is certainly well into 7 figures at the moment. Of course, that will change if there is a long-term presence of the unconventional gas industry. But, Jono, thank you very much for joining us on Fracking Nightmare.
Absolute pleasure, Ian. It's about time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this is your debut, isn't it, on Fracking Nightmare?
It is indeed. I mean, like you say, we met about 2.5 years ago when I knew very little about what was going on, and I was just concerned that every time I drove home from work past Balcombe, I saw protests and things going on. And I went down there to see what was happening. That was my first introduction to it.
And you never really left after that, did you?
No. I've been up to see the guys up at Barton Moss. I've been up to Ellesmere Port for solidarity meetings. I've done what I can, but I've been basically a keyboard warrior down here for a lot of the time until now, when I've got the chance to get out on the front line again and do some reporting. Because basically, what I like to do is to take my camera and collect evidence, because that's what they do against us. And I feel that if we are being watched, we need to keep an eye on what they're doing as well, and that's what I do.
Absolutely. So are you live streaming or videoing?
No, I video, and then what I do is I edit it all together and put out stuff onto YouTube, etc. I don't do the live streaming.
Okay, so where can people see your video footage, Jono?
I've got a couple of YouTube channels. There's Jono at Last, which was one I was doing up until about 6 months ago, and now I'm Jono Houston, Jono JONOHUSTON. Which is one that I'm using at the moment for a lot of the up-to-date stuff.
So is that where you're posting your current stuff? So if people want to see what you're posting at Horse Hill, then it's Jono Houston, not as in Houston, the city, HUSTON.
Absolutely, yes. So if you want to go there and check out any of the local stuff that I've been doing, there's quite a lot up from Horse Hill at the moment.
Excellent. So, Jono, listen, I've seen some amazing artwork at Horse Hill. Is this anything to do with you?
No, I'm not responsible for the artwork. I like to take the photographs and document it all, but I'm nothing to do with the artwork. I mean, basically, the reason I went to Horse Hill was because it's somewhere I've been before. I went for the Tea Party about 18 months, 16 months, I think you said, ago. And there was a huge showing of people there, and it was really lovely to see that many people out. But it's been quiet there since, up until last week when I watched some of the Bambuza live streams, and I noticed that the police were not taking any notice of or they were not giving any consistency in how they were dealing with the protest. And I wanted really to go down there and do some questioning of the police on what their policy was regarding being able to slow walk in front of a lorry as a form of protest over, 100-meter sort of stretch of the road. Nothing sort of any long significance, but I thought it was our way of protesting. Being as at Barton Moss, they actually had the decision that it was within our human rights to be able to do that, and they didn't want the police bringing these cases to court for something which they considered to be a reasonable protest. So I went down there on the Monday and saw a couple of the liaisons there, and I questioned them in some detail about why or what was their policy that Surrey Police had. And they couldn't come back to me with an answer, to be honest. They didn't know. But they said they'd go away and talk to their bronze and come back and let me know. And then on the Friday, when I went back down again, the day that Natalie Bennett and Keith Taylor went, I went back down to basically just to see if they had some answers for me, because on the Monday they categorically refused. Their bronze refused to let us do slow walking in front of the lorry, even for 100 meters. But he said we were quite welcome to protest outside the gates with banners. On the Friday, before I got there, I saw a video on Bambuza from the Horse Hill crew who are covering it up there, where the police actually facilitated the walking in of a lorry, which I suppose it took about 20 minutes or so, but the police did not arrest anybody. And I thought that was strange, being as on the Monday they'd said their policy was not to allow that to happen. So when I went back on the Friday, and this was just after that had happened, I quizzed the PLOs that were there, who were not wearing their PLO gear. They were just wearing fluorescent yellow high-vis stuff. But they said they would go and find out, and that the question had been already asked of what their policy was, because there was no consistency in it. But within the time that they spoke to me and then went away to find out, to clarify what the situation was, that Surrey Police, how they were going to police the protest, we had an incident where it was a people carrier came out of the site entrance, and a few people started to walk in front of it. I moved in to take some film of it, and basically the one officer with a couple of evidence gatherers charged about 20 paces to the front of this van that had stopped of its own accord to the main group of people who were protesting, and said, "Get out of the road or you'll be arrested." They then turned round after they'd been challenged on that and saying, one of the protesters said, "Well, you've already got me, taking you to court for this because you've done this in the past and you've had wrongful arrest against me. If you want to do it again, then I'll gladly go back to court with you." But then they turned around and walked off, and then suddenly turned around and grabbed one of the guys who wasn't actually stopping the vehicle at the time. He was just walking across the road. They grabbed him from behind, took him to the floor and said, "You're under arrest."
But Jono, this sounds like this is purely intimidatory policing. And since Borkham and Barton Moss, it's very clear that the police, the chief constables, have received instruction from on high that they are not to permit peaceful protest. And the Crown Prosecution Service guidelines are very, very clear. It states categorically that peaceful protest may include nuisance and disruption, but that does not make it unlawful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would call the arrest very random. That's the only way I can sort of describe it. I saw it happen. I have it all on film, as most people will have seen by now. And bearing in mind that morning they had facilitated a walk-in of a lorry, there was no consistency within the way the police were acting. And I quizzed the PLOs and saying, "Listen, you're liaison officers. Why are you not at the front of what is a demonstration? Why are you not at the front liaising, which is your job?" They were across the road for a good 20 minutes and never bothered to come and
Okay, I think what we're seeing, Jono, though, is the classic case of police intimidation. The intention here is to dissuade other people from coming down. But ultimately, it is a numbers game, because the reality is, whilst the police hold the numerical superiority, or even there's a balance, then they will be as intimidating as they possibly can to try to prevent peaceful protest from actually being conducted. So this is a crucial element here, and it's numbers. Now, we had Horse Hill was a live site 16 months ago. And unfortunately, it seems that, the local community didn't realise perhaps the significance of the operation at Horse Hill, that exploratory well that was drilled back in September 2014. So what is it going to take to get the local community to comprehend the magnitude of the impact that this industry will have on their community if it gets a foothold?
Well, I think that the local community already are starting to wake up. I mean, they've had a scare now that this is actually happening. And there are one or two really, really very well-informed and great people who are locals who are down at the camp. And they're arranging meetings. What I can say is that, I want to say thank you basically to people from Kent who have been coming over, people like Julie Wassemer, people from Lancashire, Tina Rothery, and all those kind of people who've come down and raised awareness. And I think now that the locals are starting to feel that they need to get involved. There was actually 2 arrests today, if I can bring you up to date on that. There were 2 arrests today. I've heard that one of them, a young lady, has been released now, but she's from Crawley, and her bail conditions today are to stay away from the whole of Sussex. That I found that out about half an hour ago. So I believe what you said earlier about the whole idea of getting in and taking people out of the protest is to bail condition them away, knowing full well...
Okay, but we know what has to happen here. And I mean, it's not for everybody, of course, but the reality is that if she breaches those bail conditions, she has to go before a magistrate. And I can pretty much guarantee that any magistrate will lift those bail conditions immediately. What the police are relying on is people not wanting to get arrested a second time. And especially, obviously, people that, are new to this process. So it is intimidatory. So, look, I want to turn this around because I don't want people to get the impression that, if they go down to Hawes Hill, there's a risk of being arrested. Because there is no need for people to get arrested. There are other people who, are ready to get arrested, and that's absolutely fine. But what's really important is that those people that are there, and particularly those people that have come, some distance to help the community in the Hawley area, they absolutely, as we've heard earlier from Steve Spy in Cheshire, ultimately this comes down to the local community actually taking not only just an interest, but also taking the reins and letting UCOG in this case know that they're just not going to get an easy ride.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Jono, I just want to, because we're running out of time, and I want to actually take the opportunity to express my concerns because Stephen Sanderson, who is the executive chairman of UCOG, he took over from Dodgy David Lenigas, last year. But he made this statement, and I want to offer my interpretation of this statement because in an interview with the BBC, he said, and I'll bring it up on screen, here we go. He said, we're looking at 700 metres below the surface here, and there is a UK-wide ban on fracking above 1,000 metres. So it's not legally possible, and we wouldn't entertain it. But then here's my comment. Stephen Sanderson's statement must be treated with extreme caution, as he will be very well aware of the political definition of fracking, which slipped into the Infrastructure Act without any MP having the opportunity to vote on it. So what we're looking at here is, in my opinion, Stephen Sanderson effectively saying, look, we're not going to frack. There's no need to worry. Keep moving along. There's nothing to see here. And he's not lying based on the new political definition of fracking. Now, I'm going to show a very, very short extract from Voices from the Gas Fields because I flagged this up. Now, this was nearly a year ago when we were producing this documentary. So here's this very short clip where I'm talking about the political definition of a frack. In the UK, the Infrastructure Act, which passed into law in late February of 2015, effectively establishes a political definition of a hydraulic fracture. If less than 1,000 cubic metres of water is used on a single stage, or less than 10,000 cubic metres of water are used for the entire process, then it will not be regarded as a hydraulic fracture. So under this new definition, what occurred at Priest Hall would not actually be regarded as a hydraulic fracture. The reality is that a frack is a frack is a frack. Now let me just put that in perspective for those people who still think in old money. 1,000 cubic metres of fluids is just shy of 220,000 gallons. And that's a single stage. And the total operation, less than 10,000 cubic metres of fluids, that's 2.2 million gallons. So in other words, what occurred at Priest Hall, what Cuadzilla did at Priest Hall, according to the new political definition, was not a frack. So when we hear the likes of Stephen Sanderson saying, nothing to worry about because, it would be illegal for us. No, it wouldn't, provided they stay under 1,000 cubic metres, 220,000 gallons for a single stage, or 10,000 cubic metres or 2.2 million gallons for the whole operation. It's a frack. So, I think that the people of the Hawley area and all those surrounding villages and all those people in those high dollar properties in that area need to take a very real interest in what's unfolding because You know, you had an opportunity 16 months ago, and you got a second bite at the cherry. So I know that there's a number of events coming up, Jono. So this weekend, tell us about these two events this weekend.
Right, this weekend there's the Horse Hill Bike Ride, which is meeting up with a Horse Hill March for those who don't feel like doing the bike ride. But they're going to meet up at the pub at the top of the road. I believe it's the Black Horse, and then walk down the lane to the site. That's on this Saturday.
So the bike ride starts at 10:30, and that's meet at the Victoria Road car park in Hawley.
Yeah.
At 10:30, and then for those who don't want to cycle, it's meet at noon on Saturday at the Black Horse pub, which is on the Reigate Road on the A217.
Yeah, just across the road from the entrance to where the camp is. And yeah, that's great. If people can get along there, it'd be wonderful. We need more locals. That's what we need. We've got a lot of backing from other places in the country. You know, people from Balcombe who've been through it all before. People from Lancashire, from Kent especially. Some lovely people I'd met over there on Friday from Kent. So yeah, we need more local people to turn up to this thing, and I think they will now. I think
Good. And yeah, I'm planning on putting the bike on the back of my car. And I'll certainly be up there on Saturday.
Breakdown.
And then the following week, on Sunday the 28th, there is an event in Hookwood.
Yes, there's a meeting there at Hookwood. I've only just found out about that one. But if anyone wants to go, have a look at the either the Frack Free Surrey site or Keep Surrey Frack Free, or just type in Surrey. You'll find it. There's plenty of information on there. Just keep following it, and we're trying to pump it up into Facebook as much as we can and into the media.
Excellent. And then just a few miles away, just across the border, in fact, in Sussex, on Saturday the 27th, there will be a screening of Voices from the Gasfields. That's at the Village Hall in Washington, West Sussex. And the film will be followed by a Q&A session with a number of people, I think, from Balcombe. And then actually the following week in the same venue, I'm going to be giving a presentation, a talk there on the whole unconventional gas, nuclear waste agenda, and looking at that in context of the what's unfolding in the global arena in terms of the end of the hydrocarbon age. Don't get your hopes up too much, because I'm not talking about this year. I'm talking about we're in the twilight zone of hydrocarbons. We're in the last 30 to 40 years of a hydrocarbon-driven economy, but unfortunately, as is always the case, there are those who don't want to see the changes come, and they will do everything they possibly can to resist. Well, Jono, we've overrun by about 12 minutes today, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ian. It's always a pleasure, mate. Always.
Absolutely. When are you going back to Horse Hill?
I shall be back at the weekend for the bike ride and the march down. I shall be doing the march, I think, because I'm getting on a bit nowadays. But I shall be down there on Saturday. I'll be taking some film, and I'll be sticking it all up as I do. Just check my YouTube channel.
Excellent. And, well, for those of you who live within a reasonable distance of Horse Hill, then please make the effort to get down there on any day of the week. But if you can get down there at the weekend, it'd be wonderful to see you. And I'm going to leave you this evening with something that you'll never, ever hear anybody from either the industry or the government say. And that is, don't take our word for it. We don't expect you to take our word for it. We want you to look at this for yourself. Take your own time. Look at the evidence that's out there and come to your own determination as to whether this is an industry that you want in not just your backyard, but anybody else's backyard. Because as far as I'm concerned, anybody who looks at this with any degree of objectivity will realize that there is absolutely no place for the motherfrackers in the UK or anywhere else in the world. Come to that, but let's focus on that which we can influence. Thanks for joining us.